we had like a brand new son in the world. I wasn't sleeping. We had a huge mortgage. There were so many debts. It was a very, very stressful time. And I was just thinking, like, one day I have to tell my son, like, what do I do as a job? And I thought, well, I want to tell him that I followed my passions and I did something I was really excited about. And so that's one of the reasons as well that I decided to take the risk, leave what I knew for like 10 years of doing IT and jump into web that I've never done before.
Welcome back to the Free Code Camp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people getting into tech. And this week, we are talking with none other than Adrian Twarog, developer, designer, and teacher of some of the most popular courses on using low-code tools, no-code tools, AI tools. Again, he's a software engineer who's gone out of his way to learn these new kind of like contemporary power tools and apply them to get things done faster. And he's going to be able to share some insight into how he does that. Adrian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Quincy. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to do this because I'm working on some really cool stuff, so I can't wait to share it. But yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, man. Well, you and I have known each other since really like... I'm always proud of like scouting the talent as it's emerging, you know, and like I saw very early on, like, wow, this guy, the production value of his courses, the caliber of his teaching skills and his communication ability, and just the charm of your courses, like really struck me. And so we are proud to have published several of your courses over the years on the Free Code Camp YouTube channel. And I am proud to have learned quite a bit from you, just like, you know, reading your articles and watching your videos and stuff. So,
That's good
I wanted to take an opportunity. Yeah. I wanted to take an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and like your developer origin story. I know you have like a computer science degree and everything, but so many things about you are very unconventional, like the way you approach technology. You're like the extreme pragmatist in terms of like, I just want to get stuff done. You like throw all the dogma out the window, all the, you know, all the sacred rules are, you know, thrown onto the altar and like set ablaze.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk
kinda
about just, and also another cool thing about you, you grew up in Perth, right? Australia, like probably
most
as
isolated
far geographically
place in the whole world, right? Yeah. It's like
I mean,
that.
geographically, I don't think you could get farther from Silicon Valley. Yeah.
It's rough. It's rough. So got to be on the cloud, essentially. But YouTube's been a great place to be able to connect and meet people like you, for example. So it's been great.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm excited to learn a little bit about your kind of developer origin story and how you guys started. Like, do you remember as a kid, like your first interactions with computers?
All right. Yeah, I do. So when I was in primary school, my first use of computers was there was only one computer in the entire school. And me being myself, like I was always on there using it and playing around in, I think it was like DOS back then, and just trying to like run commands or like unzip things and show them to my classmates. So I was already like across all of that. And I can see myself from a young kid enjoying that. And so as I was in high school, obviously information tech was like kind of my favorite subject. I scored 100% for everything. And as I went to high school, like that's pretty much what I was doing as well. I was just enjoying that kind of stuff, going to the library, researching about it. And at one point I have to decide a career path because I was going to college. But my parents actually said, don't do programming or web or anything. There's no jobs in there. It was still early days. Internet wasn't really that popular. And they said I should do security because, you know, everyone will be all about computer security. The money will be there. And I wasn't too sure, but I did computer security and computer science at college. And so I left web dev on the side and programming on the side. And instead of doing the traditional route where people go to college and they learn about it, I kind of treated it more like a hobby, something I did on the side. So like when Wikipedia came out, I made my own Wikipedia clone. I learned how to like code in PHP, and I was learning all those basics, HTML, CSS, all the way back then, like 10, 15 years ago. And it was great. It was really fun because it wasn't something I was studying. It wasn't something I was going to work in because I was still learning to do computer science. And I slowly pivoted towards IT, like doing IT help desk, installing Windows and servers and stuff like that. And so web and programming was still always a hobby, and I kept playing around with it. I kept learning like the latest JavaScript methodologies and latest implementations of ESM or whatever it was called back then. But and then Babel came across as well, or Babel, I think people call it.
Babel.
And so
like
I was just reading. I was just reading because I was an enthusiast on that. I just loved it. And I had studied so much of programming that when I was in IT and I wasn't enjoying IT for because I had graduated by that point and I got into the workplace. I was working in IT. I didn't really like it because I was always dealing with problems, always trying to like, oh, my computer doesn't turn on, or this doesn't work, and people were always grumpy. And at one point, I left that job because I was made redundant, and I joined a marketing company.
When you were made redundant, you were like laid off essentially, or how does that?
Well, not really. What ended up happening was there was a downturn in the economy, and people were asking for voluntary redundancies. And so I asked. I had been there for like 5 or 6 years already, so I asked for a voluntary redundancy. So I had a bit of a pay, like a bit of a surplus, like a safety net of cash there, so I could try out web dev. And I felt like I'm going to have to start at the very beginning because I've got no experience whatsoever. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never worked in web dev before. And strangely enough, the passion of working it as a hobby for so many years actually meant that when I went into doing web dev, doing like basic websites from the ground up, just coding them, I was kind of good at it. And I also still enjoy doing it. It was still like mentally, it's like a hobby for me. And so I found it amazing. And not only that, like within half a year of working at that marketing company, they asked me to be one of the directors and buy into the company to be a shareholder and own a third of the company, which I did.
Like a partner.
And I became a partner. Exactly. And so suddenly this pivot of like swapping from IT to web became amazing. Like I felt like I was doing what I enjoyed every single day. So for me, I didn't traditionally study anything. It was more like a hobby kind of thing where I was just following up on the latest news. And so, yeah, I worked in that company for a few years, and COVID happened. So when COVID happened, I had to work from home.
I'm going to stop you there because I just want to unpack some of the things that you shared. Because COVID, like, I don't know anybody who made better use of that time than you. And I've talked to a lot of people who were very busy, including myself, during that period, making the most of the lockdowns and of the sudden surge in online, like the interest in online learning and things like that. We were very well positioned when we went into that. I want to absolutely talk about that. I do want to share a couple quick things about what you just said. First of all, it's so cool how you were able to get out of, IT, internet things. And no, it's not really internet things. That's a joke. If you've ever seen the IT crowd.
I have.
Yeah, information technology. Like you were able to get out of like that kind of like help desk type, often like looked at as kind of like I don't want to slight anybody who's in IT currently, but many people are probably listening to this wanting to get into actual software development and things like that. And they're familiar with the lack of respect that people generally have. Like, you're the guy who fixes my computer. Do it,
Yeah, like, that's how it was, really, yeah.
Yeah. So you worked doing that for, did you say 6 years?
6 years in that company, and then 2 years in consulting beforehand, and then another 2 years in the schooling system before that. So probably like a decade.
So like
in
10
IT.
years fixing people's computers.
Yeah.
Basically, and setting up networks and stuff like that, right?
Yep, all of them.
Did you have any of those certifications? Like
all of them.
Like
the
Network
Microsoft
Plus
ones and the VMware ones and the Cisco ones. Yeah, all of those back in the day. The MCPs and Cisco Cert and whatnot.
Okay, wow. So you were like a literal IT guy, so to speak.
Yeah,
Like that was
I grew from
you were like part of that
level
culture.
2 network engineer to level 3 system engineer to the senior systems engineer. Yeah, I did all of that. So it wasn't
How accurate?
Go on.
Yeah, how accurate to your day-to-day life was the show, The IT Crowd, the British comedy? Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, I did. It's when you're talking with people, it definitely feels like that kind of an experience where like they don't plug in a cable and that's why something's not working. And 90% of problems are fixed when you just turn something on and off. Even now, today, my camera wasn't working. And so I rebooted my computer and then my camera's working. So it's like that.
That's so cool. So
For sure.
you talked about DOS, and I have to share this because I just learned this. Did you know that DOS didn't originally stand for Disk Operating System?
Okay.
It was originally called QDOS when Microsoft bought it, and that stood for Quick and Dirty Operating System.
Oh.
Because it was created, it was just like thrown together very quickly, and of course it became like this integral part of like, you know, I guess personal computers in general. Like pretty much every computer that had Windows, which is built on top of DOS, but it was originally just some software that Microsoft purchased from this developer, the solo dev who just built it, because they were in a hurry to get an operating system together. It was called Quick and Dirty DOS, and they thought, we're not going to be able to sell something with dirty to the enterprises
Consumers,
of the world. They don't want dirty software. They want,
of course.
So they just removed
It's
the
all
Quick and
marketing,
Dirty,
right?
and they changed the Quick and Dirty Operating System to Disk Operating System, just to
Much
make it
better.
sound very generic
Yeah.
and kind of IBM like. But I just learned that, and I wanted to share that with everybody listening because it's kind of a cool story.
Cool tidbit.
But your company did like probably one of the dumbest things any company can do, and that's basically like, hey, we don't have enough, money to keep everybody on the staff. If you voluntarily leave, we'll give you like a one-time payout or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Think about what is going to happen when you do that. Like any managers in the audience are probably like, their hair standing up on their arms, thinking about like any company.
Well,
that would
this
do
was
this,
a big
like,
company, though. It had like hundreds and hundreds of employees. If I left,
But
it didn't
what
really
is
matter
likely
too
to
much.
happen? What is likely to happen? Sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting
Oh,
you.
yeah,
We
yeah,
have
go
a
for
huge
it.
time difference between the two of us. Again, you're like as far geographically, there's probably at least like, half a second of latency between you and me right now. So think about what happens when you say, hey, anybody who wants to can leave and you'll get like a one-time payout. Like, who is going to leave your company? Is it going to be the weakest people on the team who phone it in every day and like, they're not going to want to go get on the job market. They're not going to be confident in their skills. Who's going to take the payout and leave? The Adrian Twarogs of the world who are like, 10x developers, like rock stars, whatever you want to call them basically, but people who get things done and are like passionate about what they're doing and are constantly expanding their skills and stuff. Those are the people that are going to walk out the door if you essentially bribe them to leave just so you can reduce your headcount and your payroll and stuff. So that is like basically the dumbest HR decision you can make. Like, in my opinion, as a manager, if we ever got in a situation where we needed to do layoffs, and knock on wood, freeCodeCamp's never had to do that, and we've like structured the entire thing like where we just save a ton of money and we keep costs as low as possible, so we can keep all our instructional staff, all our all of our engineering team like in place. But we would never do that. We would just have those hard conversations and choose people and let them go, because like what your company basically did was they ensured that only the weakest people stay at the company. And what happened to that company? Are they still?
Yeah,
still
they're
going?
a huge organization, so like they're a chamber of commerce essentially, and so every single
they were able to
business
weather
in
that.
Perth is pretty much a member of them, so they can weather pretty much
This is
any
like the
situation.
Australian chamber, like we have American Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
AmCham,
So the West Australian Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad they're still around and that this wasn't like a fatal mistake, but I do believe just the extremely limited knowledge of the situation, I think this is always a mistake. And if your management ever offers you money to like leave the company, you should take that money, you should run. Because that's a sign of like, first of all, ineptitude in the management. And it's also, you can absolutely go out and get better opportunities, right?
And to add to that story as well, it wasn't as easy as I make it sound. At that point in time, like I had no savings whatsoever. my wife and I had just my wife gave birth to our son. And so we had like a brand new son in the world. I wasn't sleeping. We had a huge mortgage. There were so many debts. It was just a very, very stressful time. And I was just thinking, like, one day I have to tell my son, like, what do I do as a job? And I thought, well, I want to tell him that I followed my passions and I did something I was really excited about. And so that's one of the reasons as well that I decided to take the risk, leave what I knew for like 10 years of doing IT, and jump into web that I've never done before. So it was a very tough decision, but like I'm really happy I did it.
Yeah, you followed your dreams, man. And I want to like dig in a little bit more into those dreams, because we just like, got into your 30s basically, like very quickly probably. Maybe we can talk about what those dreams were early on. Like you just inputting commands into DOS, being kind of delighted and enthralled by just the most fundamental aspects of working with computers. What were your dreams? Do you remember?
So I always liked building ideas, whether they were little projects or little startups. I think the very first thing that I couldn't do was get some really cool games that were being released in Japan. And so I figured out a way to get go to a Japanese website, manually translate it, download their emulator and ROM, and then run those games locally at my school computers. And I'm like, all right, I figured out this like really complex solution. And these games are still in Japanese, but they're still fun to play. And then after that, I thought when I'm going to high school, I wanted to build a little system that keeps all my notes for me. Basically Evernote or OneNote today. And later after that, Wikipedia came out as well. And then after that, I'm like, all right, what other ideas can I build? So I always was kind of building ideas, and I built them in private. And sometimes I built the whole thing and I didn't know how to release it. Sometimes I built half of them. But I was always, this is the hobby side of things, where I always was enjoying that process of creating things. And programming let me do that.
So your passion for games led you to like find these kind of cool workarounds with emulation and stuff like that. I'm obviously like I can tell from your background. By the way, I just want to compliment your background. That's a real background. That is not a green screen. You can reach out and touch that YouTube 100,000 subscriber award. You can touch that Pikachu. Yeah, that is. Anybody who's listening to the audio version, if you get a chance to check out the video version, you can see his background. But we keep this. Like, I intentionally keep the visuals to a minimum here, just so everybody who's listening to the audio version gets the full experience, other than looking at me and whatever video game I've got, like one of those Three Kingdom arcade games in the background, right? Going, so you don't have to just look at my face. You can look at the cool video game in the background if you get tired of looking at my face. But you've got a really rocking background. So I'm excited to hear that like you were into games early on, and that kind of further fueled your passion for technology. That is definitely a common thread among a lot of the people that we have on the freeCodeCamp podcast.
Didn't know that.
Is like I used to say that like the way that like most of the developers I talked to got into software development was through like a passion for games, right? Doing something like just learning how to like do like a root on like Super Nintendo SNES Mini or something like that, or learning how to sideload stuff onto like an Android phone and like be able to have hundreds of thousands of
when
games
I was
or
in
whatever.
high school, I bought myself a Palm. Like, I worked a day job and bought myself one of the original like touch device Palms that HP released. And so like I would load different software on there. Yeah, the PDAs. I was like the only
Personal
person in
data
the entire
assistant.
school with one. So
That's pretty cool.
Fun.
They must have thought you were like a drug dealer or something. What is
Tech
this
nerd, maybe.
expensive consumer electronics thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, but you prioritize getting these kinds of tools because you enjoyed technology.
Exactly. So even now, like, I love grabbing like the latest Oculus Rift or VR and seeing like how can I play around with it? What can I do inside of there that isn't otherwise available? I like playing around with Raspberry Pis, or even just getting a projector and seeing if I can like connect up the Raspberry Pi to a projector and then just like run it on a solar panel or something like that. It's just fun putting different ideas together like that.
So you have kind of like a recombinative approach to like technology, like taking a bunch of off-the-shelf things, like almost modules, and putting them together. And we're going to talk a lot about that during this interview because you are a huge, staunch advocate of using like low-code tools, no-code tools, AI tools to get things done and kind of like glue your custom code together. Or your custom code is rather gluing these powerful tools together and building applications, but it's like you're playing with power tools instead of, hammers and saws. And that is definitely the vibe I've gotten from you, and a lot of what I know about low code I've learned from you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, look, like when I used to, so I love drones as well, flying drones and everything. And so like 5-10 years ago, before DJI made pre-built drones, they would just sell you the kit and the flight computer and everything. You'd have to, I would program my own flight computer, connect it up to a controller, configure the controller, solder all the components together, and then learn to fly it, right? And so one of the things that I learned early on is I learned a lot by doing that. It was a lot of fun, but now it's so much easier when the drone is built for you and everything's set up. And so if you think about NPM and NPM packages, that's kind of the same thing. They kind of solve problems for you and they're ready for you to use. And one step further from that is like the no-code tools and low-code tools. They're ready for you to use, so you don't have to rebuild the same thing from the ground up. And that's why I've kind of always been at that bleeding edge of technology. So whether it was back in the day, like the programming, whether it was the low code, and whether it is AI now, that's kind of like the horizon I like to be across and the kind of content I like to do as well. Yeah.
And before we get too much into that, like I do want to talk about a little bit about your career progression after you left IT. Again, taking a big risk. You said you had a mortgage, you had a newborn son, and
wife wasn't working either. It was just all on my shoulders for the salary. So it was it's a tough decision.
Entire family's putting food on the table was down to you, and
you have
your ability
a lot
to
of
figure
security. If you work at a job for 6 years, you have security there, right? And if you have a mortgage, the bank looks at how long you've been working at a job. If I just jump jobs to a new job, from that job, I go into a career I've never gone into. So I'm at the very bottom. And I take a salary cut where my salary basically gets cut in half from what I was working at. So like before I was working on about 80,000 and I dropped it down to 40,000 a year. So that was like a huge cut in salary. So yeah, it was a scary thing to do.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And it sounds like you started at the bottom. Like, can you describe what it was like arriving? Some guy, you were probably in your late 20s, early 30s at this point, like showing up at the developer bullpen. Like, what was that? What were those first few months like working as a developer?
It was interesting because I was coming into this company replacing one of the other developers, right? And so he would normally spend 1 month to build a website. And then I would come in now and I would build that entire website in a week. Same kind of website. And I'm just like, all right, why did it take him a month to make it? And so it was the very first time I had ever done it, working properly in a job. So then the next time I built the website, I built it in 5 days. Then the next time I built it in 4 days. And the other guy was still building it. He was now subcontracting for the company because he wanted to work somewhere else. He was still taking a month to do it. And I was now taking 4 days to do it. And so slowly over time, I realized that like programming is a bit of a skill. If you don't upskill, you're always going to stay at the same place. And I think this guy was set in his ways. He wasn't developing his skill sets. He was just kind of reusing what he knew, and it was taking him a long time. Whereas I was always upskilling, and that upskilling had a huge benefit over time. And so that's why I was a lot further ahead than him, even though it was the very first job I ever worked at. It was the very first few websites I have ever created. Just my hobbying and learning and always staying up to base with what's happening in programming had me further ahead than him, who had been working in it for 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. And it sounds like you very much have like a growth mindset, so to speak, and you just proactively are out there absorbing. I mean, you used the term bleeding edge earlier. You like to stay right at the forefront.
It's ahead of the cutting edge. It's the bleeding edge.
Ahead of the cutting edge.
Things might die or they might come to fruition. Like, I remember when React came out for the very first time, and nobody was using it at all. It was like so new that there wasn't even like a release. It was just like a thing on Facebook, and I was already using it then. And Node came out, and I'm like, all right, this is gonna. Sometimes you can just tell these are gonna be the technologies that stay. And I was already at Node at like 0.02 or whatever the release was early on, and yeah, building tools with it. So it was great fun, and it just meant that as I saw them progress and as each new changelog came in, I was reading every single line that was being released, every new feature that was there. Kind of like how Bun is out there now, and Deno, like as soon as that got released, like I'm always there essentially.
Yeah, awesome. Shout out to the Deno subreddit, which I'm the sole moderator of, because it's happened so many times. I may have told this story before, like some new technology comes out and some big corporation comes in and like squats the subreddit essentially. So it's like, well, I'll show them. I'm going to get the Deno subreddit so that no bad actor can get it. I should probably do that more frequently when they announce new technologies. Go find the. I mean, it wasn't just like I didn't just go and like, oh, I'd like the Deno subreddit. Like any 4-character combination or something like that is probably going to be taken. I had to go through this lengthy process with like the Reddit, overlords to get it, but I was able to get it. Same
like
thing with
getting a domain, essentially.
Our nonprofits. I have that one, although I haven't really done anything with it because most people just use our nonprofit. But sorry, total tangent. But so what you're saying is, it's almost like you're like the venture capitalist of learning in terms of, you're taking risky speculative, you're investing risky speculative amounts of time in learning these new tools, which may or may not become mainstream. For every Node.js, there are like 20 different technologies that just like. Do you remember Gulp?
Well, guess who? Yeah, I do. I was using that, and guess who was using OpenAI 2 years before ChatGPT came out? This guy.
Awesome. I did use it a little bit with GPT-2, like the public edition, the playground, I think they called it back in the day, and I was like. But it was a spectacle. I wasn't actually using it to do any work. I was just like, isn't this cool? But were you actually using it to get work done early on?
And I would build applications on there for my marketing company to do things like generate ads. That now like every company is trying to do that. But back then there wasn't the appetite for that. And in order to use their API for like one task, you had to go through a safety checklist of like 20 questions showing examples and your code to go through and approve the use of something that's only 20 tokens. 20 tokens was the limit, which if you think about it, that's like 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah.
It was insane back then.
So limited. And you can't have like, it doesn't store stuff in memory. Like what GPT and these newer tools, like I think Claude can hold like 100,000 tokens or something in its context window. So you were working with the most primitive versions of these tools, and you were still finding ways to use them.
Yeah, well, one of the cool ideas I had was, and this is something I built out and then sold, was a micro autocomplete. And so because the context window was so small, what I would do is I would grab the last 5 paragraphs you wrote, and then it would guess the next 2 words you write. And so it's almost like the autocomplete you have in VS Code, but because it's only guessing the next 2 words you have, it's really quick. It's like when you go on Gmail sometimes and you go, hello, and it just fills out, hello, Quincy. And sometimes just fills out those 2 words. But when you're writing a document, sometimes that's useful, and you could just hit tab, 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 and it writes out a sentence for you. So I had to be creative in the ways that I would like utilize OpenAI back then.
Yeah. So getting in early with the tools. I want to get back to your office. Like, how did your bosses react seeing like, wow, this new kid is really fast at building stuff? Like, what were your first few
like,
months?
How can we make more money for this, right? So for them, they thought, all right, 1, they can do more sales. So their sales pipeline increased. But 2, unfortunately, it meant we can sell websites cheaper now, because rather than 40 hours to make a website, it only takes Adrian 8 hours to make a website. And so instead of charging $10,000 for a website, now we'll charge $2,000 for a website. And so what ended up happening is the company doesn't actually make more money. I just get more busy with more work for the same amount of money. And that was one of the issues I had, I suppose, working at the marketing company. Like, it ended up being just me working a whole lot. Like, I enjoyed programming, but I didn't end up making any more money, nor did the company make any more money. So that's where I started thinking I need to think of other ways to make money, whether it is startup ideas or creative endeavors or something. I was thinking, what can I do? And so that was always in the back of my mind. And I started, reaching out to friends and trying to see where can I get ideas for doing that.
Yeah. So how long were you with this company ultimately?
Probably 5 years.
Where you are now a partner for 5 years. Okay.
Yeah. So 5
years. And when do you remember when you left? Did you leave before the pandemic?
No, after.
After.
So go on. You've got a question there. I can hear it.
Yeah. Like we're ramping up to the main course of the Adrian Twarog saga, which is the pandemic. But so during this time, you're kind of feeling. I mean, it sounds like they probably could have found some happy medium between charging $10,000 or a website and charging $2,000, and maybe it was closer to like $5,000 that the market would have borne. I don't know, but it feels like they should have adjusted the rates to reflect the increased productivity that you were doing. And were you teaching anybody else, or were you like the sole developer at this company?
So first year I was working with them, and they saw I'm a pretty good person to work with. Second year I became a partner. And I owned a portion of the business. Third year, we started hiring staff. We grew the team to 10 people. Then the fourth year, the pandemic happened. So like the third year I actually hired 2 or 3 developers at that point in time. So I was actually mentoring people. And then the fourth year, COVID happened. So we had to let go of those staff because we didn't have the money for it. And when COVID hit, we were all working from home. And that's when I started YouTube. Yeah.
And again, as I said earlier, like nobody that I know made better use of that time than you did in terms of just establishing yourself as a teacher. Yeah, tell me.
I decided I watched everyone on YouTube and they're all making tutorials. So the way I decided to make my content was, how about I show people real websites, which I'm working at my company. And since I'm a director, I can, decide what I'm going to publish or not. How about I show them real websites I'm building for clients, and they can get an idea of this. And I'll also turn them into templates so that they can download themselves and utilize for their own clients. And so every day I was working, and every day I was recording myself work. And so I had videos every day come out. I think I made about 300 videos in the year of COVID, which is absolutely insane. But that was pretty much just me every day going to work, doing my work, recording myself, and then collecting whatever the gold nuggets are from that, and then publishing it. And then I finish my work day, and then I'd do the next work day, and I'd record myself while I'm doing my work and publish a video. So I would not only get my work done, but I'd also have video content out there and grow that YouTube channel, which was a great time to do.
Yeah, man, 300 in 1 year. So basically, like, pretty much every day, and this is while you had, a youngish child.
Exactly. And it still meant, I was still doing my family responsibilities, still playing with my son, going out to family events. And then at the end of the day, everyone's asleep. It's 7 p.m. I'm like, all right, well, I've got an hour or two. I'm going to record a tutorial, and then I'm going to publish it. And so even Saturdays and Sundays, I would knock those out as well.
Wow. And just to let everybody know who's watching this, again, you're in Perth. Here in Texas, it is 9:46 a.m. when we're recording this. What time is it over there?
It's closing into 11 p.m.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're a night owl, or you've acclimated to being able to, work late at night in a way that most people who have kids are not able to.
A lot of coffee. But
a lot of coffee.
I've got a good routine.
What time do you stop drinking coffee? Just out of curiosity.
I usually like to break it up between meals. So one before breakfast, one after lunch, and then one after dinner. So
interesting. So you're literally drinking coffee after dinner. 6 p.m. You're drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. What time do you usually go to bed?
Around 11 or 12.
Oh, okay. So we're crunching up against your bedtime. So you're so if I have to reach through the screen and kind of shake your shoulder to
This is the best time for lighting because I don't have any sun or anything coming through, no harsh lights. I can like set up the scene really well for the backdrop and everything like that.
Man, your lighting approach is totally different. Like I'm in front of like big, windows basically, and I just use all natural lighting. I don't know. I just like having natural light flowing through.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lights that I control.
Wow. So it's like a moon landing over there.
Exactly.
The darkness
it looks like a complete mess outside of the frame, but inside of the frame it looks great.
Yeah, man.
I also
really
have
cool.
a fog machine as well to add like a little bit of that haze in the background.
Yeah. Really? So you're actually like adding texture to the background with
it
fog?
also adds this glow around the lights, which is nice. So you'll find that a lot of people that do cinematic scene setups, they always have a hazer.
A hazer. That sounds like something that only a fraternity would have. Okay, so let's talk about let's talk about like your day-to-day workflow during COVID, because I mean you established that at night you're drinking coffee all day, you're doing normal family stuff, but you're also excusing yourself from dinner with your thing of coffee, going into your workshop, and you're recording tutorials, you're publishing them, and you're not just like when you publish on YouTube is not just like, oh, I'll just upload the video. Like you got to do some editing probably. You have to like come up with a fun thumbnail. Thumbnails very important. You'll see a lot of experimentation with the thumbnails on YouTube, and thanks to Bo Carnes, who runs the freeCodeCamp YouTube for coming up with some of these silly thumbnails. But the getting people to actually click through and watch your video, that's important. So originally, like everybody starts uploading, and maybe YouTube will throw you like 3 or 5 views or something like that, right? Like I frequently watch videos that have like no views. That sounds weird, but like sometimes I'll be like the first person to watch a video, and I'll be like, wow, it's like so cool. It's cool to be like in the ground floor. But like what was your early YouTube growth like?
So it's a tricky thing because when I came in, it felt like the whole scene was so saturated. There are so many people doing content. There was like this dev ed guy, which was like funny, and this like web dev simplified guy with like beautiful hair, and like I'm just like, how do I get into this scene? And so I thought it was impossible, but I thought, all right, what I'm good at is like breaking things down and improving them. Like I'm always at the forefront of that. And so when I made videos, say I wanted to do one on CSS animation, and I had to do one better than Kevin. I would do is I would have
the king of CSS.
Exactly. And so I would look at his video, like I would search something like, for example, CSS animations, right? I would look at his video. I would then have a look at every other video in search. I would go through the video and see every topic he covered. Then I would research CSS animations, and I would write up a script that covers everything he did, plus extra in a shorter and more succinct amount of time, with a better thumbnail and a better title, better tags, better description, more timestamps, even though timestamps weren't even a thing back then, as well as, rather than 1080p, which was the thing, I was already on 4K back then. I was like having a look at every single thing I can do to create a video that is better than whatever was currently there on search. So whether it was a video about CSS animation, whether it was about React and its implementations, whether it was about Bootstrap, every video I researched, I had a look at how can I improve on all the videos that are out there and make a better video. And that's kind of how I did it every single day, day by day. And I tried to improve by 1% every time as well. So each time I had a little bit more budget, I'd get a better microphone. I'd get, I started off with no backdrop, and then I got, a bookshelf, and I filled it out with stuff, and I got a better lighting setup. So bit by bit, it eventuated to where I am now, essentially.
Yeah. Wow. So one thing to note, like, first of all, I love the way that you just kind of incrementally upgraded stuff as your budget could provide. And you can make money on YouTube, which we can talk about in a little bit. But it's not like, Scrooge McDuck jumping into the vault and swimming around in the coins. By the way, if you actually ever have a vault filled with like gold coins and stuff, don't attempt to dive into it.
But that might hurt.
Yeah, it might hurt. It might leave a dent. So you, it sounds like you were able to focus on like different production considerations and stuff, but it is worth noting that you are a skilled teacher. Those years you spent at the agency training other developers in different concepts and stuff.
That was
Those
only
years
1 year,
you spent
actually.
in IT explaining things, right? But like that time, it sounds like you did learn a lot about like how to communicate knowledge, how to impart knowledge. Because
No, I didn't actually. That's the thing that I think a lot of people skip out on. That's not where I learned. I learned it from watching people's videos, as I said, and doing the researching how they're delivering their topics, and then also going and researching how the details are on like CSS animation on different websites, and then putting that into a formulaic script that has no fluff. So like one of the things that I don't do very well on my videos is there's not much personality. I don't add many jokes. There's not much like stuff like that. It's just pure, like what's the pure essence of how I can teach a concept in as little words as possible.
so you really optimize for terseness, and man, you're like the first person I think that's ever actually like said, no, I'm not a great teacher. You know, like,
No, I don't think so.
has deflected my attempt at edifying you. But I mean, that makes sense. So you really took like a clinical approach to this, dissecting what makes things work, as opposed to like almost like a quant might tear apart like a baseball team and figure out like, why are we actually losing these games? Like completely like passionless and just very
Well, yeah, exactly. You have a look like,
yeah.
where is the wind resistance coming from the bicycle? What's the better tire you can use? How can you make the frame a little bit less heavy? Like every bit by bit by bit by bit. Because like the cyclist is going to cycle. He's going to like move his wheels. But it's all the other things that goes behind the scenes that if you're cycling 40 kilometers, these 1% gains, they have a lot of traction.
interesting. So it's a very marginal kind of approach to gradually just teching up different aspects of your videos.
I wouldn't say that my videos suddenly made me successful. It was definitely a linear path of success that might have had a little bit of an escalation due to those 1%. But like, what did they say about interest? There's a saying for that.
I mean, a compound interest over 300 videos, a 1% increase is you're going to have the best videos in the universe. If you can actually do 1% for 300 iterations in a row. That's pretty phenomenal. I might be incorrect. I would have to pull up my calculator because I can't do that sort of stuff in my head. Let's figure out like what is the total improvement that would be experienced if you were to improve 1% for 300 days. Maybe I could ask GPT that real quick.
I think it's 37.5 times over a year if it's 1% per day.
Mm-hmm. You would get if you improved 1% each day for 300 days. Yeah, and it's going to do some Python here probably. So it's just, it shows me it's just a compound interest formula. Mm-hmm. And so it's calculating it with Python. Mm-hmm. I'm just dictating what GPT is doing essentially. It's 20.99 times the initial amount. It's pretty good. It's cool. Like 2,000.
And I can see that. I can show you like my old videos and you'll see that. It's very clear and obvious how much of an improvement that there is. And that's why any of my advice to people that want to be creatives and do content on YouTube is do 100 videos. It's the same thing Jimmy / Mr. Beast says. Do 100 videos. That'll help you improve the most. And then after that, figure out what topics you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, or as I was told by the writer at Denny's, where I was drinking coffee, who saw me like working on a draft, was like, throw your first 1,000,000 words away. Just keep writing. And it's going to take time. Quality takes time. And it sounds like you just incrementally improved each facet of these videos, and that's how you arrived at your current level of quality. Which, when we say current level of quality, it's probably still climbing, right? Are you still finding little ways to improve?
Always.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do... Go on.
Oh, go ahead.
I still like to research other verticals. When I say verticals, I mean like channels in, say, photography, or channels in design, or channels in lifestyle, and have a look at like what kind of things are they doing that I can implement into the coding space to make programming videos a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah, because you're so passionate about programming technology, but not everybody is just born trying different commands in DOS, right? Like a lot of people, they need something to like ignite that passion. You need to hold their attention long enough for them to really cultivate an interest in going deeper with technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So it sounds like importing a lot of those. I mean, like there are a lot more accessible fields than programming. You could argue that programming is one of the least accessible fields, and that you have to have some baseline understanding of like computer science, how computers work. You probably have to have some basic understanding of mathematics. You need to understand like a lot of different concepts before you can really even like attempt to program without just being completely, befuddled and frustrated, right? So whereas if you show somebody like, hey, here's a cooking tutorial, let's crack the eggs, let's mix them, let's add a teaspoon of
that I can't get into. Sorry. That's beyond me, cooking tutorials.
But it is like a physical thing. Like it's a procedure that probably anybody could watch, and like if you put them in some situation where like you're going to go to jail for 10 years unless you can make me an omelet right now, here are the directions. People could probably do like an omelet, right? Whereas if you gave somebody the same proposition, you're going to unless you do rot 13 in the next 20 minutes, you're going to go to jail for 10 years. Like they would probably not be able to do that, the typical layperson, right? Just because it is like, it's not a dark art. Programming is something that can be learned, obviously. Like we're teaching millions of people to learn each month through freeCodeCamp, and you're teaching probably at least hundreds of thousands of people how to use these different tools each month. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what it is that you're teaching and because I look at your YouTube videos, and you've got some very popular videos, like 5 million views on some of your different project videos, and most of your most popular videos are around GPT because you rode that wave and you were like one of the first people. You were on the ground floor. You were already ready. You already understood how to wield these tools when suddenly ChatGPT kind of kicked off this chain reaction and got everybody talking about AI and stuff.
Yep. So what's the question?
The question, what are your videos about like these days? Like, what would you say the main focus, if people were like going to your YouTube channel, like what would they go there to learn primarily, and what are you teaching?
I had the 2 channels. I've got my Adrian Twarog channel, and I like to these days think that that's kind of about programming and AI. Then I've got a second channel called Codex Community, and that channel is about design, no code, and a little bit of AI, because AI is pretty much everywhere these days, but more about design and no code. So it kind of, one is more about programmers and one is more about those people that don't want to program, but they still want to build websites.
Right. So you could like, there's this term like technical and non-technical, right? Like, so semi-technical people who may know a little bit about coding, but don't want to spend all day in VS Code, like wiring things together. They might use low-code tools or no-code tools or AI tools in order to get things done instead. So Codex is kind of like catering toward those people, whereas like the main Adrian Twarog channel is like the super user, like the person who does know how to program and also wants to harvest the utility of these tools.
I guess like the Adrian Twarog one is more also personalized because it's me working sometimes on creative projects I like to work on. And so that's why like some of my videos are like me building an RPG as a website. So rather than having a fitness tracker or a food tracker, you have your life covered as an RPG, and you can see your strength and endurance and health and stuff like that. I just like to see at like, how can I make a creative topic, or how can I make a programming thing more interesting than it otherwise is, rather than just creating a to-do list, because that doesn't really excite me that much.
Yeah, those standard projects that people do, like portfolio projects, there's always like a to-do list. There's usually some sort of like, currency exchange calculator, like calorie counter, stuff like that. They're cool, good projects to get you started. But you could also do something that nobody's ever done before, right? You could you can follow your flights of fancy and create like I don't know, like a Pokedex for K-pop singers or something like that. Wherever your passions like overlap, you could build something in that space. And so you built this. It's a pretty cool project. I watched the video last night just to refresh. I'd seen it before, but basically you do build an RPG that like tracks different aspects of your life that you're trying to monitor and improve, and kind of gamifies your actual real life, and not just gamifies like you might use Runkeeper or Strava or one of those tools to like track your runs or something. But this is like an all-encompassing, like you are the role-playing character and you have stats and you want to buff those stats, right?
Exactly. It's just a different mindset of like how you track your life rather than just like the traditional way. You want to gamify it essentially, because everything that's gamified is a little bit more fun these days.
Yeah, and I'm going to link to the video in the show notes. But
the funny thing about that video is like it's one of my most popular videos, but it doesn't really teach anyone anything. There's no programming in there. It's more like a storytelling video. I bring people along the journey of me trying to solve how I'm going to build this thing. And I kind of give them the summary of the problems I encountered when I was coding it, and then just show them the solution. So if you want to learn code, you're not going to learn anything from that video. But if you're going in there to get some motivation, some inspiration, to have a look at a cool creative idea, and even if you want to download the code and build it up yourself, you can jump into the description. I've put it on GitHub, so you can actually run it up yourself. So that's the kind of video I like to make a lot of, Yeah,
and one of the cool things about that video, and a lot of your videos, is you don't just open up VS Code. All right, let's, get this, these libraries in place or anything like that. No, you start with sketching things out. You are kind of like a designer, at least in how you approach different things. And of course, you've got like mad design chops, which we'll talk about a little bit. Like you've like published an entire book about design. But you like to actually start out with like paper and pencil, or in this video, you use like an iPad and like one of those Apple pencils that cost like $50. I don't know if they're actually worth it, but like you use that thing and you start like drawing out a UI. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your workflow when you approach building a project. And do you still start that way? Do you still start with like a blank canvas and start, hashing out UI details right there with a pen?
So funny enough, I still use that same iPad and I still use that same pencil, Apple Pencil. And so, yes, I still do it that way. It's one of the ways that I like to create like any idea, where I actually just sketch it out. Like, what am I trying to solve? How can I brainstorm this? What are the key elements? And then I can kind of map them out. And then when I map them out, I like to then visually map them out. So rather than creating a design, I just sketch it out, like little squares and whatnot, to like visualize what will this actually look like when it's working. And so that kind of makes the whole process of building it a lot easier. It's like saying, the recent idea I'm building is a Pokedex. It's a Pokedex for real life. And so, Pokemon 20 years ago had this cool AI thing that you take a photo of any animal and it tells you what it is with an AI generated voice. And it just can use vision and it detect what that thing is. And now we have ChatGPT. So like Pokemon already knew about this thing 20 years ago in the Pokedex. And now I'm just thinking, how can I build my own Pokedex? So a Pokedex, essentially, I can break it down into steps. Like 1 is you take a photo. Number 2 is you send that photo to an AI and it tells you a description of what that item is. 3, you save that photo in the description. 4, you generate a voice, or you use an AI voice model to describe what that is in audio form rather than in just text. And then 5, you save it to a database. And so that's kind of like a Pokedex for real life. But it's mapping out those steps and then creating visuals for each one of those steps. You can break down a complex problem and just make it happen, essentially. And it's kind of the mindset I bring towards programming, I guess.
Yeah, and do you use any formal system like Universal Modeling Language, UML, or anything like that when you're trying to diagram these things out? Or how do you actually wire everything together in your mind and on paper before you actually start building? Do you do all that before you actually start building?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I never learned any of these paradigms or these frameworks, so I just brainstorm it out and then I just draw it and then I just build it.
Yeah.
But visually, like that seems to work really well, and I think my camera's going there. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Like from my point of view, from working on early concepts of ideas I've had to working in business to now making content on YouTube, that's always worked really well. The only one thing I haven't done is worked in large teams of like maybe 50 to 100 developers working on like a huge repo. I don't know if you would need some sort of proper frameworks in mind for that kind of stuff, but for the kind of stuff I'm working on, it's always worked perfectly fine.
Yeah, and so collaborating with teams, in my opinion, like that is a completely different skill set than just being like a solo developer and like being your own product manager and being your own developer, your own designer. Like the most efficient number of people to have on a team is always going to be one, because there's like none of that communication overhead. You don't need to formalize everything in a way that it can be community. Yeah, quick and dirty.
As you said, yeah.
Exactly. So like people take for granted like how difficult it is to get an entire team on the same page and convey an idea that like the visionary person on the team who has this vision for the product. Like, but when you're doing things yourself, whatever system works for you, right? Like you don't need to feel like, oh damn, I don't know UML. I'm not a real, developer if I don't know UML, because I can't actually do all the fancy like squares and stuff like they do in the movies, you know? But the reality is, whatever works. And it sounds like your brutal pragmatism is on full display in terms of how you kind of mock these projects up before building them out.
And I'd say the same thing happens to a lot of things in real life. So my wife, for example, started up a nail salon. And so you'd normally, for a business to get, a loan from the bank, they want like a business plan and all this stuff. And we just did it step by step. Oh, my camera's going again there. Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Okay, it's back. It's been like scrolling in and out.
That's a mindset that I have where I'm building a application. I said, let's do the same for the nail salon. Let's just map out, all right, we need a location. We need nail stock. We need, some equipment to get it up and running. And then we just start advertising and getting people to come in. And anything along the way, we just buy as we need. And so we're able to do that and build a nail salon from scratch. So I'd say a lot of things in life, even like when I had my son, like there is no plan for that sometimes. Like you have to kind of learn as you go.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like there's no book, How to Be a Great Parent. I'm sure there are tons of books on that, by the way.
I'm sure there are books for it.
But like, I mean, really, it's like an experiential thing. It's like there is no book, How to Learn to Code and Get a Developer Job, except there is that I wrote. Yay. Just Google Learn to Code book. But like, that's just my opinion, man. Like,
yep. No, correct.
In practice, there's going to be so many different things, so many different like things that are specific to your circumstances and everything like that. And they're going to be similar, like with building a nail salon or building, a Pokedex for real life, whatever your project may be. To some extent, you have to rely on your instincts and you have to just accept that, like, hey, if I was able to accomplish something, there is some validity in how I accomplished it. Even if looking back, it seems like I was just flying by the seat of my pants and had no idea what I was doing. The proof is in the pudding, right? Like, or the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? If the pudding is edible, you must have done something right? It's not like radioactive, sludge that is like making people throw up and stuff. It's pudding, right? So, you kind of have to feel through. But I just want to say, like, love yourself, respect yourself, respect what you've accomplished, and don't feel like, oh, I'm just like a dirty hack who just like, slaps things together with no grace or elegance. You'd be amazed at how many of the projects out there are kind of hacked together. Like famously, since we talked about Microsoft and DOS earlier. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered why they jumped straight from Windows 8 to Windows 10, and why there's no Windows 9?
I thought 9 just didn't seem like a good number, so they just skipped it.
What I heard was because they had like Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows, they had like all these different parts of the Microsoft code base referenced Windows 95 because they didn't imagine like, oh, we'll just do a full rewrite when we create some future version. But no, they just keep piling more and more code. So if you use like Windows 11, it probably has a whole lot of Windows 95 code in there. That's what I've heard. I haven't actually inspected the code base, and I don't think it's open source, so I don't think I can. Maybe they've open sourced some of the old versions, but they didn't want to risk having references to Windows 9X because they might have used like regular expressions or any number of things, and it would just add all this complexity. So like, hey, I have an idea. Let's just skip to Windows 10, and maybe people won't notice that we skipped Windows 9 because we don't want to spend, developer years hunting through this massive code base trying to identify all the situations where having a Windows 9 could clash with Windows 95 or Windows 98.
Right.
So yeah.
I also remember
like
that they said they would. Yeah, I remember they said they would never stop after, like they would stop after 10 and there would just be updates after that. But then there was 11 and, but you're right. Like, I think sometimes you don't know what's happening behind the scenes and some things are made with duct tape and sticky tape, but they're held together and they somehow work. And on the front end, everything looks pretty.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody goes and sees how the sausage is made, so to speak. They just see the resulting, if you're not a vegetarian, the resulting sausage is, very delicious, right? So, it sounds like to some extent you and your wife are just feeling your way through building this nail salon, and you similarly are feeling your way through becoming a prominent YouTube creator, becoming a developer. It sounds like your first days on the job, where you were like using all these tools and figuring out all these new things and bringing your own curiosity to the forefront and applying it to find inventive ways of saving time and getting things done faster. It sounds like that the vibe I get from you is that you're unashamed of the hackiness.
Yeah, I'm not. I think it's part of the process that a lot of people need to see that, things aren't written perfectly in code every single time. And those early videos I did had all the mistakes and how I problem solved those mistakes along the way as well. And so I think that was an important part of it. Then on top of that, I don't think I've ever personally had imposter syndrome because I suppose I started at the very bottom and I assumed I don't know anything. And so I was very upfront that I don't know anything. And then even when I'm teaching concepts, it's me not knowing about something and discovering it and showing that journey. And so for me, it's always been a very natural part of how I present, I guess.
Yeah. And I am similar in that I did have some imposter syndrome, but I just assumed like I knew nothing and that like I'm, some 30-year-old guy who's wading into this field that people have already been coding for like 20 years because they started when they were kids and they were in like high school programming club and robotics club and stuff like that. And I just assumed that I was surrounded by people that were more experienced, more capable than me. And like, okay, let's take as a given that those people are, more capable than me. What can I do? Is there still a place for me to get things done? And so, just finding things that I can practically do to help. Yeah. So I have a lot of questions that we haven't even gotten to because we've had so many exciting things to talk about. You have like, of course, your YouTube channels, Codex.
Codex,
yeah, like Codex, like a book as opposed to a scroll, a book that has like binding.
Or the
and opens
early
up
OpenAI model for coding, Codex.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, one of the things you do is you are an AI evangelist, which sounds like almost like an apocalyptic role. Maybe you could talk about what you do as an AI evangelist.
I'd say it's less about playing around with all the AI tools and more just thinking like, what cool tools should devs know about? Like, what are cool AI things that are going to make your life a bit easier if you're coding, if you're making websites, if you're designing, because it's kind of like suddenly a year skipped by and there's dozens and dozens of new tools out there that compete with Adobe and Figma, and they compete with Photoshop to generate stuff that wasn't capable. Like the most recent one I've seen, and I can't really say it'll help developers, but it helps me, is like there's music generation with AI now. And these songs that it generates means that I don't have to worry about, having copyright music or anything. It's a beautiful song made in 2 seconds from a single prompt. In 2 seconds, you get anything you want. If you want like instrumentals, if you want lo-fi, if you want synth, it's all there, and you just describe what you want. Like I want a song about the Roman Empire, and you can even have lyrics in there. And the lyrics sound like a real person. You could even specify what the lyrics say, and it turns it into the song. So it's amazing. And that's just one tool out of many.
My friend sent me one of those the other day. It was like about using the restroom on the clock. It wasn't exactly like that, but like the best 45 minutes of my life.
Wow.
Like getting paid to use the restroom, basically. And I'm not saying exactly what the lyrics are because it's a very crass song. But it was. I was like, wow. Like, did a human really not play a part in writing the lyrics to this? I mean, you could tell there was artifacts, and if you're a musician, you can listen and you can be like, okay, like this is like the most generic, chord progression, or this is like the most generic like drum tempo, or it sounds like it's just like you threw a bunch of stuff in a blender. It doesn't seem original, but it is technically original in the way that like a string of text coming from GPT, technically if you plug that into Google, it's extremely improbable that exact sentence will have occurred before, even though, it's trained on, but I could see as a creator just not wanting to worry about copyright strikes. That was a huge headache. Anytime you're using any sort of recorded music, unless you're doing a channel about music where you need to like actually use excerpts from music to talk about it, which should be fair use, but even like Rick Beato and a lot of the big YouTube creators that are in the music space complain about like Led Zeppelin. I can't even play the first three notes from Stairway to Heaven without getting copyright strikes.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. But it is a thing. And so now AI is coming and solving a lot of problems. Like even there's an AI website called Reloom AI. And what it does is it makes wireframes using AI. And all you do is type in a prompt. I want a website for a nail salon. And it creates all the wireframes. It creates all the text. And sometimes it can even do the visuals for you. And it takes like 5 seconds to create you the concept out for different websites. And you can regenerate them. So like they're just making the process of building a website a lot faster.
Yeah. And what are some of the other types of AI tools you use? And I do want to get more into like your formal job as an AI, like that's on your LinkedIn, AI Evangelist. Like,
is it? I didn't even know that.
I think so. I mean, I just looked at your LinkedIn a minute ago and I saw that it like jumped out at me.
You've been like, I didn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not your job to like stay on top of LinkedIn when you're mostly it sounds like you're just working on your own. Working with like you do sponsorships and stuff with companies.
That one, so the AI and version you're talking about was there's a company in West Australia that does they're called Generative, and they do AI projects. So as I was getting requests for consulting in AI, I would forward them on to these guys.
Okay. So basically, like people come to you all the time, probably asking you about AI.
I had hundreds of emails. It was insane.
Yeah,
especially
so you basically just like help kind of triage those and steer those to people that actually do contract work in the space.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So that was what I was referring to when I said AI Evangelist. Okay. It's literally written there.
Originally, I didn't know where to send people, and you know that like you don't want to recommend someone when you don't know if that company is any good. You want to actually like meet a few people and actually recommend someone who you trust and know will do the thing properly. So like in this case, I finally found someone in Australia that does it. And so that's why I've been recommending people to that company.
Yeah. So that is like a heartening note. If for any of you out there listening that are really interested in like a specific kind of vertical of technology or something like that, eventually you may become so authoritative in that space that you're turning away work and you can get paid to send that work to somebody else who actually has the bandwidth to do that work.
Correct.
Yeah, it sounds like an enviable position that you've established for yourself. So you, in addition to being like the AI guy, the low code guy on YouTube, like one of the serious creators in the space who has a computer science degree and has worked as a developer and as an IT guy for like, nearly 2 decades, it sounds like you're somebody who actually, has built out that expertise and that reputation over the years. But in addition to that, you also have, as I said earlier, like serious design skills. And you've created like a web design roadmap, for example. Can you talk about your relationship with design?
Yeah, sure. When I was doing a lot of the websites to begin with, obviously I didn't have a designer, so I had to design them myself. So while I was staying ahead of all the programming stuff that was happening, I was always staying ahead with all the design stuff that was happening because I was just designing my own ideas. So I was always very ahead of the bleeding edge almost of design. And over time, I learned all the concepts that make a good website look good. I was always having a look at like redesign concepts for like Facebook or Google or Reddit even, and making my own variations on that just as a hobby. And over time, when I did my YouTube channel, I thought, well, why not? Like I started my YouTube channel doing like just websites, doing some basic HTML. Then I grew it out to like other things in programming, to React and Node. And then I thought, why not grow it out to design as well? But I noticed YouTube punished me when I created content for programming and design because they're almost two completely different subjects. It's why I created that separate channel called Codex for design and kept programming separate on my Adrian Twarog channel. But I did like teaching those design concepts, and I never had any courses or anything like that. And I thought to myself, one of the best things I can do is create a course for design. So I have my own course, but people can learn these fundamentals, especially developers who never learn any design. So I made a course called Enhance UI or Teach Me Design. It was specifically designed for developers. Coming in because I knew the developer mindset, I thought I would go through all those fundamentals of like topography and color theory and stuff that I learned over the years, but more in a programming type fashion. And so I started doing this course, and I thought it would take me like a month to do. Then I thought it would take me half a year to do. Then I thought it would take me a year to do, and I continued to make it and make it and make it. And then I teamed up with a guy called George, and we continued to build it, and it ended up being like over 400 pages long because there's obviously just so many concepts for design. But I ended up releasing it almost a year and a half down the track. And design is luckily one of those things that never changes. Like color theory has been around for 100 years. Good topography will never change. While different fonts will be popular, the fundamentals for that will always be the same.
Right.
So I thought if I do it properly and do it once well, it'll always be there. So unlike React or Next.js, every year there's a new version. You have to relearn the course or something like that. Even JavaScript, there's new modules out there. Design is one of those things that I can make it right the first time and everyone will benefit forever, essentially. If you learn that course, you'll benefit forever into the future from doing it. And so I built that course. It's called Enhance UI. If you go to enhanceui.com right now, you can visit it. And yeah, it's doing really well. I did like I also did a video on every single chapter of that book. So it's like a full-on book, full-on video course, and now I've got exercises and workshops in there, and I'm continuously building it out and improving it every year now that I've got it out.
Yeah, it's really cool that it's like a living document, and there's like a community around it. You have a Discord for it that people join?
So yeah, I've created a Discord. I've called that Discord Merge, and I just thought I need to have a different name from Codex. So I'm slowly creating a new channel called Merge as well on YouTube, a third channel. Because Merge sounds more like a thing where I'm talking about design because you're merging code with design. So that was my mindset behind it. And yeah, if you head to Merge, I've got a huge community on there. And what I do is also I do free design reviews. So if you have a website, I review it. I go over like what you can do to improve it. I'm sharing all these things like the AI tools about how you can create wireframe designs. So that's kind of like the mindset behind that community anyway. Yeah.
And I think it's so cool that you're like so committed to this field of design that you just kind of stumbled into as a developer. Like, as you said, you just had to kind of like learn this stuff in order to be able to do a better job as a developer working on different contracts. You know, obviously like the usability and things like that are important in the functionality, but what it looks like, the actual aesthetics are important. And, you know, people care about aesthetics and what is aesthetics, what is good typography, what is, you know, like design hierarchy, what are a lot of these different concepts? Well, a lot of that stuff was cemented in the kind of like advertising age of like the, you know, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. If you've seen Mad Men, like one of my favorite shows of all time, like they're just constantly talking about these things, and they're like steeped in that culture of what is going to catch the eye, what's going to hold attention, what's going to be legible. If you've read, there's a book, who is the guy the big advertiser guy that Ogilvy on Ogilvy, his book, and he talks about how like they have like this ad for like Volkswagen Bug that they've used for like 30 years and they never changed it because it works, it converts. Like, and why does it work? You know, and like trying to understand, strip that down to the nuts and bolts and understand the actual design considerations. So just like with like freeCodeCamp and mathematics, we're huge advocates of learning mathematics, and mathematics doesn't really change. It's been like more or less the same for the last 2,000 years, and then people have layered some additional stuff on it. It's one of those skills that if you like really learn it properly, you don't have to keep coming back to it, right? You just for the rest of your life, you have that toolbox for understanding what is good design and being able to create things on the fly and being able to recognize good design in other things. So this sounds like a really cool book and a really cool course. Yeah. And a while back, you sent me like a book that was like one of the most beautiful, I guess, self-published books. Like I'd never seen a book where every page looked so, deliberated upon. Can you tell me a little bit about that book? Is that the same book?
Yeah, it is. It's originally I got inspired by someone called Chris Do. He runs a channel called The Future. It's a design channel. And so he wrote a book, and it was just like his own kind of personal book about himself. But what he did in that book was every page on its opposite side had a beautiful visual he had created in his, life. And it was like a design image. And so I thought, if I'm going to create this book for developers and I want to teach a concept about color theory, how about I create a beautiful visual for every single one of these pages? It's one of the reasons the book is like 400 pages plus. It's because 200 pages is the content, and the other 200 pages are the beautiful visuals that explain or represent that visual. And so if you've ever followed George Muller on Twitter, you might have also seen he's done a lot of those visuals as well on like things like React and stuff. If you can visually show someone like a folder structure in a beautiful way, it's a lot more appealing than if you just see a snapshot of VS Code. And so that's the mindset I brought into creating the book, so that I wanted the experience of reading it to be almost like a very nice one. I've got like motivational quotes in there from aspiring artists to like beautiful visuals that represent things like the topography itself, so that you can see as well as read the content. Yeah,
that's so cool. And I'm just curious, like, how much time does it take? Like, what tools do you use to lay that out, by the way?
I actually got the proper InDesign from Adobe, and I built that up properly as a published book that can be then later on printed. And I've done a dark version and a light version. I just haven't gone through the process of seeing if I can get it printed on Amazon yet. But that is like one of the steps I want to do in the future too.
Yeah. I mean, you can basically take any book and put it on Amazon and they can print it. Now, whether it's going to be like this fancy bound kind of like coffee table book, like there are books that cost $50, $100, right? Like Geddy Lee put out a book about the electric bass, right? And I was like, oh man, that'd be amazing. But I'm not spending like, I don't know how much the book is. It's like $100. Geddy Lee book bass. If you don't know who Geddy Lee is, he's the bass player for Rush. And it's a $50 hefty book, probably weighs several pounds. I may get one. I may get a copy. I love bass. But like if you wanted to print like an actual like thick 400-page like nice paper quality book that's going to sit on somebody's coffee table or going to sit on a bookshelf behind somebody like me, wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. If you do print one and you ship it to me, I will put it on the bookshelf behind me. I've been looking for good books to put on there. You may need to go to a special publisher for that. Or you may be able to do like, I don't know if anybody still does Kickstarters, but something like that to get the publication of it. But I'd be very interested in having a physical copy at some point. And I think a lot of people listening to this would be too, because I love design and I've spent so much time at bookstores just flipping through different books on like design concepts and things like that are just very beautifully crafted. And like a lot of times they'll be like really weird shapes, like they'll be really giant or really small, and you like flip through them and they find all these creative ways to illustrate the different concepts. And I had lots of friends when I was in college who were designers as well. So like, yeah, it's a field of personal interest for me, even though like if you look at freeCodeCamp, we have like an extremely like almost brutalist. If you're familiar with like the brutalist movement of architecture, is like bare concrete. Like it's freeCodeCamp is very much simple, and like we don't do anything fancy. Like we just like exactly what inspired by that kind of pragmatic, like practical. Like I call it command line chic because I was trying to like recreate the feel of being in a command line, like maybe like MS-DOS era, whenever you're like doing a bootloader or something like that.
At one stage I said, let's redesign your website because I could make it, look good. But you're like, you like it to be that brutalist style. Because I've actually redone, like I've even done Jesse or Code Stacker's like a design course on. Sorry, no, I think he has a VS course, VS Code Superhero. So like I've done a few designs for a couple of the creators, but if you ever want a free code camp redesign,
you should do a course like let's redesign freeCodeCamp. Like maybe we can incorporate some of the ideas. Like a lot of the reasons freeCodeCamp looks the way it is because we have a lot of people accessing us with like very limited data. Everything has to be really high performance. We use very few images.
Well, here's where like you use a little bit of smarts of like, can we do a super fast speed test on their connection within the very first 2 seconds of the load? And if it's a slow connection, you give them a slow lo-fi version of the website. If they've got a fast connection, you build them up. So that's how I think. I'm like, how can I reinvent this to give them that? And you find that that's what the news websites do, right? They actually have a lo-fi and a hi-fi version. And the lo-fi is actually for their SEO. So when Google and crawlers hit their website, they get a very fast, snappy website with all the article. You go on there and you have 100 videos and ads everywhere and you can't even read the article. So it's like, how are they even indexing it? So there's tricks around that.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, because everything you do is like slightly adding to the time, but if you can do it fast enough, everybody can have a decent experience, and people who have, I've got like 500 megabits here in Texas, like we're spoiled here in the United States, and so I could easily go to like the most multimedia intensive website, and I probably wouldn't even notice the load time. And I imagine a lot of people listening are in like South Korea or someplace like that has ridiculously fast internet too. Okay, so I am really interested in talking about the pandemic a little bit, just because you made such heavy use of that. What were some things that you did to really capitalize on the fact that so many people were getting online all at the same time? Like freeCodeCamp, we experienced a dramatic surge in usage, which unfortunately is kind of like tapered off because people, a lot of people, their ambition was bigger. Their eyes were bigger than their stomach. And once they actually started coding and like getting into it, they're like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. But a lot of people stayed, of course. So like, I think most websites I know, like learning websites, and then down, but like the baseline is like twice as high as it was before the pandemic. Maybe you can talk about, what you did.
I didn't particularly tackle the pandemic from a business point of view to like get the YouTube channel working really well. I think at that point in time was when I started YouTube, and I saw some small guy called Florin Pop, and he published this blog saying that he's gonna make 30 videos in 30 days, and I'm like, that's easy. I'll make 365 videos in a year. And so that's where I had that idea to make a video every single day. And while I didn't make 365 videos, I think 300 is a pretty good success rate for videos in the year. And I suppose that was the mindset I went into it. Like I kind of treated it as a challenge, but whether I got subscribers or not wasn't the goal. My goal was like, can I make a better video than what's online right now?
And that's a good goal because that's measurable. You can't control how many people subscribe to your video. Like I see people all the time make the mistake, like, I'm just going to get to 1,000 followers on like Instagram or on YouTube or wherever. And they make the goal some sort of number that's completely outside of their control. But what you did is you're like, every video is going to be 1% better. And that's subjective. But like you did have the concrete goal of, I'm going to publish a video every day for 300 days. That is something
I can
fully within your control.
I can control that, and I can control making a good video. I couldn't control if it gets views or subscribers, and that didn't matter to me at all. Yeah.
So to some extent, it was just like brute forcing your way to brilliance, like spending a lot of time and energy creating videos. And that process was where you were honed, so to speak.
Correct.
So let's say hypothetically somebody was starting today, knowing what you know today, if you had like zero web presence and maybe you didn't even have the skills that you have currently, would you do the same thing? Would you just dive in and just start building?
I would. And if you have a look at like one of the popular people out there, Josh tried coding. That's what he did. And if you have a look, he's having a lot of success. But if you watch his early videos, that's quite him learning how to code and then sharing what he's learned step by step by step. And while it was very raw at the beginning, you can see his improvement over time, and it's very personal and very genuine.
Yeah. So one of the things that you've said that is that even with AI tools, you still need to know the fundamentals. That like, you know, tooling is never a replacement for actual comprehension of what's going on under the hood and like being fundamentals. What are the fundamentals that you would encourage web developers to learn in 2024?
I think, and this is what I recommend still to anyone who asks me they want to start coding. I actually do point them to freeCodeCamp, and I say, learn the responsive web design course where you learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because that is the best way to enter into learning to code. It's got like really good tests and examples, and it really teaches you that kind of stuff. So like, I think that's one of the, like the easiest, most, like, there isn't a paywall behind it either. So yes, funny enough, you have put together a really good resource for that one.
Yeah. Is there any like other big skills? Like, would you consider design a skill that's gotta have, or would you consider it like
I'd say
nice to have?
Design is something you can look at after you start building websites. Once you're in there and you're building content for yourself or for companies, then you can start looking at design. So I wouldn't say, oh, do my design course first and then learn to code, because that's not going to serve you as well. Learning to code will probably serve you really well if that's what you want to do. Obviously, if you don't want to be a coder and you just want to learn design, do my design course, of course.
Yeah. Awesome. And let's talk about low code and no code. So a lot of people, a lot of developers especially, are like, they groan every time they hear low code or no code. Just like people might have grown when they heard Microsoft Front Page when they were building their own websites back in, or Dreamweaver or something like that, that like tries to simplify this, you know, more like high touch process of artisanally crafting a website rather than just, you know, throwing a bunch of templates together, right? How would you describe no code? How is it different from low code? And then like maybe give me like an idea of for whom those are useful.
So I would hope that most people that are developers have used Figma before, because often developers and programmers are converting Figma designs into code. And Figma is a full design piece of software. It's almost like Photoshop. And I think no code is getting to the point where you can drag and drop and create a visual design and it's already coded. That's basically it. You don't have to worry about writing any boxes. You don't have to worry about any alignment. You just drag it into place and it's right there. And I've seen the stepping stones of these where like originally you could drag an element in with Elementor or Webflow, and then you'd still have to code out like the padding and everything like that. You have to understand those principles of like how HTML works and how sections work and how divs work. And it's slowly like the no-code movement is slowly moving away to that, to quite literally you do not have to know what's happening under the hood. You just drag the elements into how you want them to look, and it just works. So that's what I find really interesting, because I wonder like how much coding will be involved in the future besides building the functionality under the hood. And this is where like the low code, no code will be like visuals are built by designers, and then functionality is built by programmers, and there's almost going to be a separation between the two at some stage, I think.
Interesting. So you think that like right now, like a lot of web developers do their own design work as well, but you do think that things are going to become more specialized? Or do you think that like low code tools will allow a mediocre designer to do design work so they can focus on the development work, and vice versa for like a mediocre developer?
I do think that programmers
can focus on.
Yeah, I do think that programmers and designers will be using no-code tools in the future for any marketing company or web company, because it's just easier, faster, and better in all manner. Like you can build where I used to build websites in 2 weeks down to like a week, down to 4 days. You can use no-code to do that in 4 hours. So if it takes you 4 hours and you have a website that's secure and looks exactly the same and it's responsive, and now you can update it in seconds rather than hours, it's a no-brainer for any business in that point of view, right? And so that's where like a lot of the industry for business is moving that way. So if you want to do that, of course, there's still functionality in businesses that build applications that integrate with AI or do different things with cameras or whatever it is. And so for that, programmers need to understand the fundamentals. You can't particularly have no-code tools jump in that easily. You usually have to build web apps. And that's where a lot of the programmers will probably be going in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely like, I've seen a lot of programmers who are resistant to using those tools, almost like John Henry, like I can drive spikes faster than this damn machine, like that kind of mentality. But at the same time, like a lot of them are like, well, I use it for this or I use it for that. And the number of things they use it for may be slowly growing. And it's not necessarily going to replace that developer instinct or the designer eye or things like that. But it does, provide additional leverage so that you can use what you know and your expertise to get things done faster, right?
I like to think of it as farming, right? A farmer might go to you and say, I can use my hands to scoop out a hole and put a seed in there and pack the earth in perfectly. So why not always use my hands? The next farmer might go, I have a tool to plow and then a tool to like throw the seeds in there and a tool to compress it. So why not use those tools? Then the next farmer might go, I have a machine that does 1,000 of these and lays the seeds for 1,000 things and does the articulations for 1,000 of these. And then the next farmer goes, well, I have an AI that does an entire acre for me, and all I click is start, and it does all the seeding, all the watering, and everything. So at each stage, a farmer still needs to understand the fundamentals, but it doesn't mean that the farmer who's manually digging out the soil and putting one seed in there is doing it any better or worse. It just means the tools now are kind of greater, and if you want to utilize them, sure, you can. You might have more success, and from a business point of view, it makes sense. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you know how to do that either.
Yeah. Let's talk about AI tools, because obviously you're an AI evangelist and you know a lot about AI tooling, and you've been working with these since before it was cool, right? Mm-hmm. Back when you were like one of the few people who cared to use these, at the time, very limited tools. What AI tools do you use kind of like currently? Like, can you maybe rattle off some tools that you use maybe every week?
I think my day-to-day, the most I use is obviously GitHub Copilot. It allows me to autocomplete any programming code that I'm trying to figure out, it's useful. It's very useful. I do use ChatGPT for brainstorming. So if I have like questions or I'm trying to almost treat it like a psychologist where I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say or do, it helps me kind of brainstorm in that regard. And then I also use, I have 11 Labs. It's not really programming, but it replicates my voice to such a degree that people can't recognize when I use the AI voice in my own voice. And sometimes in videos or in content, I can just use that, write up a script, and suddenly I've already said the script, which is great.
Yeah. And I've talked with like Andrew Brown in a previous episode. Andrew Brown, Exam Pro, creator of many tutorials, and he actually has like a degenerative voice condition. So he makes heavy use of AI speech synthesis tools. And freeCodeCamp has a course coming up soon that will teach you how to like kind of wrap your voice around like like a newscast or whatever other piece of audio to make it sound like you're saying it, or you can speak different languages. It's very cool without having to actually put in the time to actually learn them.
That's cool.
Call me old school, but I really enjoy learning languages, and I will continue to do that, though I'll probably never have time to like learn German, for example. So this will be a convenient tool if I need to like, ever pretend that I can speak German or just dub videos into German. So it sounds like do you actively like follow, what is your information diet like? How do you stay up on all of the development in AI, this very fast moving field?
I don't know. I just think my feed tells me, whether it is on TikTok or Google News or YouTube or Reddit, like I just seem to stumble across these things. And if they're not getting much traction or visibility, I like to create video content on it too. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. So you're just out there. You're just like consuming and reading. You don't have like some carefully curated like RSS feed like that is like exactly what you want to be learning. I mean, do you listen to like particular podcasts or anything like that to stay up on things?
No podcasts. I don't read the newspaper. I don't really check out Reddit. Like for the most part, it's just somehow the algorithms on Google News tell me. The Google News algorithms are pretty good in that regard.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, I guess there's like, in terms of productivity and something like just not taking the time to try to curate an information diet and just relying on algorithms to serve up good stuff. It seems to be working for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. And just like a final kind of like question about like AI tooling in general. Let's say you had a new client, like maybe you can talk about how developing like a marketing website for like somebody's got like some pharmaceutical product or something, they want to create a website for that. What would that process look like when you were first starting, and what would that process look like today? Maybe you can just walk us through from memory what it used to be like and now what you would do if you had suddenly a job like that.
It's a good question. I guess in the past, I would actually have a graphics designer. So like the salesperson would kind of make the sale. The graphics designer would put together all the assets in Adobe XD. And then I would sit down and using WordPress, I would spend 2 weeks almost, or like a week, just writing out every template file for the home page, for all the sub pages, the headers, the footers, writing out all the HTML, writing out all the CSS. I think I'd have like 5,000 to 10,000 lines of CSS, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 lines of HTML. And then I would spend a week, like I would spend days doing all the responsive design, and I would spend days testing for all the bugs that would happen, and eventually I'd pass that back to the designer. There'd be new mock-ups. I'd have to revise that design, and finally ship it to back to the sales guy who would present it to the client. Whereas now, like I can sit down in a day and build it with the client in front of him, just drag and dropping elements or pre-made templates and moving them about and putting his work straight in there in front of him, and even show him how to do that so that if he needs to make changes, I don't have to do them every single time either. So it's a completely different process.
Wow, that's dramatic. So going from something that might take like an entire month of going back and forth, have lots of parties involved, to you literally being able to interface directly with the client right in front of them and build it out. How would that affect billing if they're like, oh, this only took you like, a few hours to build this website? Like, how much do you think you could charge versus how much you used to be able to charge?
Well, if someone said they can build you a house rather than in a year, they can do it for you in a month. Does that make the house more valuable or less valuable now that you don't have to pay for your mortgage for the rest of the year and you can move in within a month?
That doesn't have any sort of. I mean, it makes the house more valuable for sure. But the way that people traditionally have looked at work is like there's that old anecdote about Picasso, right? So Picasso's sitting in a cafe, and this woman's like, "Oh, Picasso, can you draw something for me?" And he takes out a pen and a piece of paper. He's like, does like one of his beautiful like one line paintings, like where he draws like the wiener dog with a single line from a pen, and it takes it's just a few quick strokes, and it takes a few seconds. And she's like, "This is amazing, thank you." And he says, "That'll be $5,000." And she's like, "What? $5,000? It only took you a few minutes." And he's like, "Yes, but it took me 60 years to become Picasso."
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly it. Right?
That's how things actually work, and that's how value is created in the world. But that's not how people are used to thinking it. Most people would be like that lady, and they'd be like shocked, like, "Really, you want thousands of dollars for what took you that much time?" But you, as a developer, as a designer, as essentially a product manager, have built this skill set. You've learned how to use all these tools. Like, how much would you charge? Like, in theory, if somebody wanted, like, I'm not sure if anybody in the audience actually would want to pay your hourly rate or whatever, but like if you were to sit down with somebody and build something right in front of them to their specifications, what would that cost now versus what might it have cost to have that entire month's worth of labor?
As I said before, it used to cost about $2,000 to do in a week or two. Now it costs about $20,000, but I can get it done in a day. And if you think about it, I always like to give the metaphor of like, imagine you have a problem with your tooth. It's a pain, like a business pain, right? It's a pain in your tooth and you need a root canal. Now imagine having to wait 2 months for a root canal, and you have to come in 5 times for 5 surgeries for a root canal. And by the end of it, you've spent half a year and $10,000 for a root canal. I give you a procedure that takes a day and gets rid of that root canal for like, about the same cost, and it doesn't cause you any pain whatsoever. Would that not be more valuable to you than going through all that dentist pain? And so that's the business mindset that business owners think about, because for them, their website means they're getting less conversions. Every day it's not working is that pain of a tooth, essentially.
Yeah, that's a great way of framing it. What advice would you give to somebody who's doing like freelance development work and doing design work and potentially learning these tools so they can do what you do, or they can sit down with the client? Like, what advice would you give to them as far as broaching that with a client who might already have it in their mind, but it only took you a few hours? Like, I mean, the root canal analogy, of course,
I would say
you could do something like that.
But I would say go on YouTube, search up Chris Do, from the future, and he has thousands of videos on how to talk with clients on exactly this subject to showcase the value of what you're building rather than just the hours that you're working.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, that is great advice, and I will look him up, and I'll include a link to him in the show notes. Adrian, it's been so amazing catching up with you. Thanks for staying up late. And just sharing your many insights with the community. I hope everybody tuning in has learned a great deal from Adrian. I hope you'll check out his book. Hope you'll check out some of his free code camp courses. He's got an epic wireframing and like development. I think you use Figma. You might use some other tools in that video course that we published a while back. Are we going to get some new videos from you in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I've got some blogs in the works, and I've got some video content that I'm doing for the Enhanced UI book. So I'll see if I can maybe turn that into like a 5-hour long course for you guys, because that's the minimum amount of time usually for a video of yours.
Well, I've learned so much from you over time, and I'm continuing to learn. Like just over the past hour and a half, I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and it's so refreshing to hear your perspective, because I don't think you're a contrarian and you're like thinking differently from everybody else just to stand out. I think you just have the most kind of pragmatic perspective on getting things done, and it's so refreshing.
Thanks.
It's like you're like the least dogmatic person I've ever talked to in this field, probably. Like,
all right, well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, cheers. It's great. So, yeah. Well, thank you again, and for everybody listening to this, I hope you enjoyed learning from Adrian. And until next week, happy coding.
Thanks. See ya.